We are at the Mentoring Matters discussion room on Clubhouse, and this is a room sponsored by the Mentoring Club. The Mentoring Club is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide a mentoring community for aspiring and seasoned leaders. Anywhere in the world, we help working people find mentors who can guide them to develop the skills they need to achieve their career and life goals. We help mentees fulfill their goals through meaningful work that creates positive impact in the world. And as mentees become leaders themselves, our dream is for them to become mentors to others. We have started our series called Career and Life Journeys of Mentors. For today, we are featuring one of our mentors, Jossie Haines. And Josie is the VP of Software Engineering and Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI, at Tile. She has been an engineering leader in Silicon Valley for over 20 years. And congratulations, Josie. That's a long time. And her mission is to keep women in tech with men as allies. Welcome to our Career and Life Journey of Mentor series, Josie, and thank you for being our featured mentor today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Retaining Wit, Women in Tech. I like that title. Why do you care so much about retaining women in tech?
It's such an important mission. In early 2018, I actually almost left the tech industry when I left Apple. I was burnt out. I was tired of how women in tech were treated. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm going to do my own thing. I realized, though, that if I walked away, I'd be walking away from having the ability to really impact the future. Technology impacts our life in so many ways, but a lot of Silicon Valley is solving is what I call convenience problems. And if we took all this brain power here and solved some of our real world problems in the world, like climate change, equality, we would make some huge strides in making this a better place. To do that, we need to have more diversity in tech and more inclusion. So many people also have missions of getting more women and underrepresented minorities into tech, and I'm so aligned with that as well. But I think it's so important to also think about how are we retaining women? How are we retaining underrepresented minorities? Right now, the statistic says 56% of women leave tech after 10 to 20 years. I didn't want to become a statistic, and it's really driven me on this mission to retain women in the tech industry.
Based on your experience, what were the common reasons for women not to stay in tech?
One of the ones that is fascinating is there's the assumption that the reason women are leaving the tech industry is because they want to go start families. But it turns out that the number one reason women and underrepresented minorities leave tech is actually because of lack of inclusion in the workplace and feeling like they don't belong and feeling like they're excluded in some way. It's not always overt. This is something I tend to call death by a thousand paper cuts. It's the microaggressions that you might not even notice. It's things like having your ideas appropriated during a meeting. It's never being invited out when your colleagues are going out to drinks in the evenings. I'm a female engineering manager, and when I was at Apple, I had a male counterpart who was my project manager. And whenever the two of us would walk into a meeting together, the assumption was always that he was the engineering manager and I was the project manager, to the point that somebody actually apologized at one point for that happening. These are all the things that can happen. And again, why it's so important that we think about this.
That's a very difficult position to be in, even being the male colleague who is with you, and he has to make sure that your position is recognized as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let us back up a little bit. How did you get started into tech? Did you always want to be in tech?
I got my first computer when I was 5 years old. I got a Commodore 64. This was back in 1984. I really loved technology. My parents really wanted me to be a doctor. My undergrad degree is actually in chemistry and material science. I started in chemistry, and then around my junior year, I realized I had no interest in going to grad school. I was pretty done with school for the time being. Didn't really want to become a doctor. Well, I better do something because my parents would kill me for getting a degree and if I don't get a job afterwards. Got a job as a technical consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers after I graduated. They sent everybody down to Florida for a 3-month boot camp to learn to code. And I picked it up really quickly. Really, like it clicked. Like I'd taken a coding class before in college. It was actually taught by a university professor who only knew how to teach grad students. So nobody in the class really learned anything. And so it was this amazing experience of just having coding click and just be like, oh my God, this is amazing and so powerful. And then they actually sent me here to California, to Silicon Valley for a week training on a now non-existent technology called Broad Vision in Redwood City. I spent a week here and it changed my life. I fell in love. This was 1999. It was the middle of the dot-com boom. I was just like, oh my gosh, look at all this technology and advancement. I can come here and change the world. This is what I want to do. PricewaterhouseCoopers wouldn't transfer me out to the Bay Area. So I said, I'll do it myself. And I interviewed for a number of jobs at some dot-com startups and landed a job as a web developer for a little tiny startup out here. End of January 2000, I moved out to California knowing one person and started my software engineering career.
So, no doctor for your parents.
No doctor. Yeah, they did not get a doctor. My nephew ended up becoming a doctor, so they got at least somebody in the family did.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned something about being a gamer. Can you tell us a little bit more about that side of you?
Yes, so I love playing video games. Like I've been playing games since I was 5. It's something I still do today. My husband and I play video games on a weekly basis, if not more often. I played World of Warcraft for like 8 or 9 years. I met a number of my close friends that way. And I worked at Zynga for 5 years. Now, I never thought I was going to work at a gaming company. And it was just so much fun. It's a nice counterbalance. That's really been my side fun passion. So I actually was really excited. I got to spend 5 years at Zynga working in the gaming industry because it very much aligned with that side of my passions.
Can you tell us anything memorable about being at Singa?
It was crazy. I joined Zynga the week we decided to take on Facebook. It was the craziest time to join Zynga. This was 2010. Facebook was pretty much taking off because of gaming. This was back in the days when your Facebook feed was full of send me cows, little items you could send in Farmville. My first 10 years in the Bay Area, I worked at a number of different companies. I worked at Sun on the Java download infrastructure. I worked at NetApp for a number of years. But this was really the first time I was going into the consumer side of things. And I just fell in love and my career kind of took off. So I started actually as a software engineer when I joined Zynga and I ended up as a director of engineering and 3 years later. I worked on the revenue pod for Cafe World, got us a couple $1 million days, then ended up becoming the first engineer on a game called Chefville, which was the sequel
Mhm.
to Cafe World. And I helped design the storage architecture. That was the central storage services for all Zynga games until that was moved to Java a few years back. Then I became director of engineering actually for Chefville after launch. And she actually also became director of engineering for advertising. It was an amazing experience, and it's really where my career grew. One of the things that I say is interesting about that, because a lot of people ask me, we've heard that women, especially in gaming, there's a lot less of you there than in the tech industry. The question I'm commonly asked is, how did you feel that you could thrive at Zynga? This goes back to something I tell a lot of people is Who your manager is really, really matters. And I think during my Zynga career, I ended up working for a manager that really did support my career growth and ambitions.
Talking about women in tech as our main topic, right? So, do you remember at that time? So, this was 2010. How many women were in your team?
In our engineering team, there was maybe 2 or 3 of us, not many. And we were divided into studios. So the way that Zynga was set up, each game team was almost set up as its own little kind of mini company of about 100 people once we launched a game. Obviously, it started smaller than that. I think the gaming industry, I think the percentage of women in all of gaming, not just engineering, is only around like 20-ish%. Definitely areas of improvement there. In the middle of my Zynga career stint, actually, I moved to Florida. 2013, unfortunately, after struggling with Alzheimer's for 8 years, my mom passed away. And so I went back to Florida for 9 months and ended up working at American Express on their Serve credit card, which was their low income credit card for locations like Mexico where people might not have bank accounts. I worked there for a while, realized a couple things. I had definitely become a Californian, could not survive a Florida summer. I really missed the Bay Area, like the technology, the culture. It was just very different. And so I actually came back to the Bay Area and ended up at Zynga again for a year before I ended up at Apple.
So, one of the main reasons why we're doing this series about career and life stories of our mentors is that people can relate that we are all ordinary people, and at some point in time, we realize that we can contribute more to other people's lives and that we could help them through mentoring. In your career, do you attribute any of your success to somebody who stood up as a mentor for you, or was it more informal, or was it more of established mentoring relationship?
My current boss, who's been my boss multiple times, including at Zynga. And so Clink has been my boss for 15 years, off and on. This is the third company we've worked together at, fourth time he's actually been my boss. He's always been an amazing mentor for me during my career. I remember when I was at Apple and he wasn't there, I was really struggling with imposter syndrome and feeling like, am I cut out for this? I had gotten some pretty nasty review feedback from a 360 and was feeling very distraught and, shared it with him. And he was really supportive. And he's always been really supportive over the years and just ensuring that I can really pursue my career goals. And so that's been awesome. And I truly believe in mentoring being so crucial and important, especially for women in tech. As you keep going up in your career, you're very likely to be the only one in the room. You need support outside of your job sometimes. You need to be building a network, taking the time to find other people to support you. Part of my story goes that when I was at Apple, I started Women at Siri. And part of starting Women at Siri was I wanted to start a mentoring program. However, the VP of Siri at the time didn't believe in mentoring. And so I wasn't allowed to start the program. When I joined Tile full time, it was one of the things that I was very passionate and wanted to do. So I actually started Tile's mentoring program back in 2018. We've now done 6 iterations of it. We're about to do our seventh. 65% of the company participates, 95% of the execs participate. And it's something that's become just so amazing to watch. We've had 6 people within our company actually be able to change jobs within Tile through the mentoring program. It really helps with retention. It helps people grow, do what they want to do, right? It's amazing. So, yeah.
I can really feel the passion from that story, that you're very committed to mentoring. In tiles, so for example, so we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It doesn't mean just women, right? It could be male immigrants or LGBTQ, right? Can you give us some idea of the beneficiaries of the mentoring at Tile? What is the distribution like?
In Tile, in general, I think we are 52% women. And then on the ethnicity side, we are 17% Hispanic Latino, I think around 30% Asian, 40% white. The one area we want to work on more is definitely getting more people of color and blacks. So that's definitely an area we're working on. What's been really interesting is a lot of the people, like I said, 6 people have actually been able to switch roles within Tile. Over half of those were women or underrepresented minorities. It was great that we've empowered them to be able to fulfill their career dreams.
You have a wonderful initiative going on there. Just to be able to relate in terms of your journey, were there any other personal moments in your life that you felt became pivotal for where you are at now?
Definitely a couple pivotal moments and challenges from my adult life. Even before then, my dad had a major heart attack a few days before my 18th birthday. And it really made me feel like I really needed to be an adult, like young, right? And it's really, I think, what really spurred me so much into just action after college, because I just felt, hey, I need to take care of myself in case something happens to my family. Unfortunately, it was my mom who got really sick with Alzheimer's. So in some ways, like that was really shocking because we thought it was my dad who would potentially have more of the health issues. My mom struggled with Alzheimer's for 8 years. It was really hard on my dad, and he went through a lot of mental health and depression challenges. And when I was at Zynga, I'd take a shuttle home from Zynga all the way to the South Bay, and which is like an hour and a half. And I'd be on my phone sometimes, like talking my dad down from depression periods. And that was my night drive home, is dealing with that while also trying to do my day job while growing significantly in my career. And like I said, my mom passed away and I moved to Florida, and that was a really confusing time for me. I didn't know what I really wanted to do next. The next really pivotal time was when I was left Apple. I came back to the Bay Area, but when I left Apple, I really thought I was going to be done with the tech industry. Looking back now, it's almost 5 years later. Like, I couldn't imagine leaving tech. Even if I leave Tile, like if I'm doing my own thing, it's going to be in the tech industry. It's not going to be outside of tech because my mission is so intertwined around retaining women in tech. I've definitely had tons of struggles during that whole time too. Actually, both of my siblings have passed away. My sister passed away 3 months before my mom did, and my brother passed away a few years ago. One of the things I tell people is everyone has struggles, and sometimes you have no idea. Like, I'm sure most of my colleagues at Zynga had no idea what I was going through on a day-to-day basis. That's why empathy and compassion, especially in today's world, is so important from leaders, because you don't know how your colleagues are potentially struggling at home. It's so important to just ask people the question, like, hey, how's it really going? And if you really show that you're caring, like, it can make a huge difference to somebody.
For people who are now starting their careers, whether they are women or male or LGBTQ, what would be your advice to them as far as navigating their careers?
The first one is network, network, network. Especially for women, but this is so important. You're going to get jobs later through your network. Every job I've pretty much landed in the last, I don't know how many years, at least 10, if not more, has been because I've known somebody at the company, or I had somebody send me the job opening.
It's the connections that you have, how you can add value to them, and eventually they adding value to you. So give first before you expect to take anything.
Yes, another one for me, and this one does fall under like women and underrepresented minorities, but I do think it's so crucial, is building some resilience. The struggles are real and they're not going to magically go away. And while I say to truly change the tech industry, it's not about the women. It's really, we need the men and the people in leadership positions to change things, create those inclusive cultures. A lot of times as women, we're raised to be perfect. There's this great book by Rishma Shujani, who is the ex-CEO of Girls Who Code. It's called Brave Not Perfect. And it's this book about how, especially in the US, but just culturally around the world, women are raised to be perfect little girls. We're told, dress nicely, play with your dolls, don't argue. And the boys are allowed to roughhouse and argue. And those skills that they develop there actually are crucial and game changing when you then end up in the workspace. And there was a fascinating study that she references in the book, which is they gave lemonade to a bunch of middle school girls and boys. And they divided it into two rooms, one with the girls and one with the boys. And the researchers told the kids that the lemonade was delicious. However, they had actually put salt in the lemonade, so the lemonade tastes pretty bad. What was fascinating is the room of boys, as soon as they tasted the lemonade, they said, ew, gross, and spit it up. The room of girls, they actually all drank it down and none of them said a word. And so then the researchers asked them, why didn't you say anything? The girls said, we didn't want to make you feel bad. Now imagine that little girl in her first meeting, right? Is she going to speak up when something comes up that she has to say? This is why building resilience is something that is so crucial.
What is next for you now? You are in Tile, you're happy, you're with your mentor for like four stages already of, of the work that you've been doing together with him. And he must be a great advocate for women and diversity to keep you going with him in his adventures. So, what's next?
And I am looking to continue expanding my mission to keep women in tech. I love what I do at Tile on a day-to-day basis. What I really want to do is create inclusive tech companies all over the world with inclusive teams. So once I leave Tile, my next future career goal is really to do fractional work or help other people create inclusive engineering teams. So those are my future goals, is not just have one or two companies that are really inclusive, but change the tech industry.
You've gone through a lot in your journey, the family challenges, losing loved ones is always hard. And you lost what, four people in those 20 years? Finding yourself and your mission and being supportive of women in tech is also a huge accomplishment in as far as getting to know yourself, what would make you feel accomplished and live with purpose. If you were to write a book about your life's journey so far, what would the title be?
This actually came from a book that I was just recently reading. In it, the lady was talking about how it was her 3.0. I really liked that. I was like, oh, you reinvent yourself every once in a while. I actually think that my life book would be Josie 3.0, how I've evolved over time.
Thank you very much, Josie, for sharing your story with us. It's very inspirational. I hope people who are here and also people who will be listening to this in our other social media channels eventually will learn a lot from you and also maybe connect with you if they need direct guidance
Of
for
course.
the challenges that they have. You're open to connections on LinkedIn, right?
Yes, absolutely.